I have this like special woman. At one of my schools, they thought she was my mom. And I was like, no, I'm not coming to school with my mom every day in grade 6. Just wanted to remind you that my new merch collection is out now at fanjoy.co/mollyburke. We have this avocado tee, avocado phone case, avocado notebook, and if you're not into avocados, we have this matching black and white #killing it jogger set. Hello and welcome back to the special corner of the internet that is for you and for me to sit and talk, and I'm coming at you today in front of a live studio audience. I've got Gallop down at my feet to the left, that is my guide dog. I've got Lavender, my kitten, in front of me, chilling with the tripod, and I've got Miss Mama Bean Eve Burke behind the camera, keeping an eye out. So, welcome everyone, welcome. So glad we're all hanging out. Yeah, you see it in the title. I mean, I don't know if this video is of interest. I just figured it's fall, which is back to school season. Most of you are probably back at school already at this point, and I'm sure school looks very different now than it did in years past, given the state that the world is in. I hope things are going well for everybody and things are getting settled and back in the flow of it. So given that, I just wanted to sit down and talk about my school experience as a blind student. In case you just randomly stumbled upon this video, hi, I'm Molly and I am blind. There's a lot of content on my channel about what it's like living life as a blind woman, so feel free to check out my playlist that's all about blindness so you can learn and educate yourself if that's something you are interested in. I feel like this would be potentially a very good video for teachers or anybody who works in the education system to watch, or for students. If you have a blind student in your class or in your school, this might be of interest. Regardless, I just wanted to sit and share my experience. I am 26. I know I look, I don't know, like 17 or 18, depending on the day. I feel like sometimes I can look 25 and then sometimes I look 15. I don't know where we're sitting today. Comment below and let me know. I know I look young. I'm not. I'm 26. I graduated high school in 2012. Wow, I'm getting so old. So it's been a while since I've had to go back to school, and I did not go to college or university. I started my career out straight out of high school. So the experiences that I'm going to be talking about today are really from junior school, middle school, and high school. One final thing that I'd like to talk about before I fully jump into my experience is just that it is my experience. I always like to remind you guys that I am Molly and I am blind, but I am not all blind people. I am not all blind experiences. I'm here to share my perspective, my story, my life with you guys. You cannot take this as fact or as the experience of all blind people, because just like every individual, we are individuals, and the way we learn, the way we experience, our opportunities are all completely different. So that aside, here is my experience. I was diagnosed with my main disease, retinitis pigmentosa, when I was 4 years old, just around that 4 or 5 mark. Okay, another clip of Molly from the future. I'm sorry I keep doing this with this video, but I just thought of something else that I feel like is important to mention. Prior to my diagnosis with RP, the school system was concerned that I had learning disabilities because I wasn't reading and writing as quickly or easily as the other students. And my senior kindergarten teacher said to my mom, I know everybody else is concerned that she has learning disabilities, but I think she just can't see. And really pushed for that final diagnosis, which we got, but then they did continue on and test me for learning disabilities, and I was actually misdiagnosed as having learning disabilities. So on my school records for many years, it stated that I had learning disabilities, even though I did not. I just wasn't able to be properly tested because I was dealing with vision loss. I don't know what it's like now. At the time, there was only one person in the province that was trained to test blind people for learning disabilities. So it was really hard to get accurately tested. And then I was later tested after switching to my third school, which was a private school. And the private school that I was at was like, there's no way this girl has learning disabilities. And so they hired the person who was trained to test blind students. I was retested when I was in grade 7, and it came back that I in fact did not have any form of learning disabilities. So that just speaks to like another issue that you can have as a disabled student, or particularly as a blind student, is the inability to learn the way other students do can lead to people believing that you have learning disabilities, or are maybe just in general like less intelligent than you are. And it's really hard to fully express your intelligence when it's hard to actually access the knowledge or information and learn in a way that's accommodating of the way you need to learn. So definitely wanted to share that was something I also went through in my education journey. So I was now entering senior kindergarten, which I know here in America you guys don't have. I was born and raised in Canada, so I'm going to be using probably a lot of Canadian phrasing, but I was in senior kindergarten. In Canada, we have preschool, junior kindergarten, senior kindergarten, grade 1. I know in America, you just have preschool, kindergarten, grade 1. So we have like an extra year of schooling when we're little. We enter grade 1 at the same time as you guys, but we enter junior kindergarten a year before you guys enter kindergarten. That's just from what I've been told from my US friends as I've like shared my experiences with them, and they're like, what is senior kindergarten? What is junior kindergarten? So this is what I've decoded, but maybe I could be wrong. Anyways, so at that time, I was evaluated for what level of support I would need. And I qualified throughout my whole schooling for 100% support, which means at all times, I had a special adult that was just there to help me. So 50% of my support came from an educational assistant or an EA, and EAs helped many different students, so they weren't specialized in any particular disability. They would work with autism, with cerebral palsy, blindness, like hearing loss. They would kind of work with the whole gamut, learning disabilities, that kind of thing. But in this case, you know, obviously they were working with me and I'm blind. So I would be who they were with 50% of the time. And then the other 50% of the time, I had what's called a vision itinerant. And that's a teacher who is specialized in working with blind students. So that is the teacher who would teach me how to read and write in Braille, who would help me learn assistive technology, who would help teachers figure out how to convert projects or assignments into something that was more accessible to me if it wasn't, who would help translate my Braille into print so that when I handed in like Braille math for my homework, my teacher could actually read it. The vision itinerant would transcribe it. So that was my vision itinerant. And then my EA would just kind of do like general disability help. Well, my vision itinerant was not there. So usually I would get, say in the mornings, it would be my EA, and then in the afternoons, it would be my vision itinerant. Every single year, it changed. So I didn't have the same EA and the same vision itinerant my whole life. I would usually go like a couple years with the same person and then it would switch. I also switched schools and school systems a lot as well. I switched schools 5 times between, you know, starting at junior kindergarten and graduating at grade 12. So that also is a reason why sometimes I had rotating people. But usually for at least a year, I would stick with the same person every single day, because that way the EA and that vision itinerant could get to know my specific needs and how to best assist me. At the beginning of every school year, my family and my team of support staff would also sit down and work out an IEP, which is an individual education plan. So at the beginning of each year, they would kind of assess where my vision's at based on the vision report from my ophthalmologist at Sick Kids Hospital, and they would look at kind of my last year's report card, notes that were taken about my learning strategies and plans from the previous year. They would put together an individual education plan. And then that IEP would be handed to all of my teachers so that every single teacher knew exactly what accommodations I required in order to learn. So certain things that they would accommodate would be, I would get extensions. So if everybody else had, say in high school, if everybody else had 1 week to write an essay, I could get 2 or 3. With math homework, a common one was that I would do every other question instead of every single question. Or I would do as many questions as needed to prove that I knew how to do the work. And these accommodations might sound unfair at first. Oh, I would also get like longer for tests. So depending on the year, I would get time and a half. So I would get like, if everybody got an hour, I would get an hour and a half. But then other years I would get double time. So if you got 1 hour, I'd get 2. And then some years I would get unlimited time. Meaning if everybody else got 3 hours and it took me 6, or 7, it took me 6 or 7. And I know that at first, these accommodations sound really unfair to the other students. Like if you're an able-bodied student and you're listening to this, you're like, that's not fair, she's getting a head start. Let me tell you, it was still not a head start. I was still behind, because the way the education system works, it really favors visual learners. And not everybody is a visual learner period, and certainly as a blind student, I was not a visual learner. So when I was younger and I could see a bit more before the majority of my vision loss took place at 14, they would do things like my EA or my vision itinerant, whoever was with me at the time, would use black expo markers and write on a whiteboard because I could not see the chalkboard at the front of the classroom. I also was allowed to write with markers instead of pencils. I would use buff or cream colored paper with really widespread thick black lines so that I could write in large print and I could see the lines on the paper. I also had a really large desk instead of like the small normal size desks. I had like a double desk. It's really wide and really deep. And when I was younger and I could see more, they every year would mount a light to the side of my desk so that my homework or my schoolwork would be lit up by this light that I could move over my homework, or it's not homework, girl, you're at school, that I could move over my work, and that way I could see it better. It was more well lit. And I also had a magnifying glass attached to it, but then I also had other assistive devices like a dome magnifier, which is like a half circle. It magnifies things and you slide it across the page and it just makes everything underneath bigger. Large print textbooks are usually in 18. So standard font is 12, and large print textbooks would usually be size 18. That was still far too small for me. So for a few years, they would have me using the large print textbooks with magnifiers, but then at a certain point, that stopped working. This is the problem when you're slowly going blind, right? My vision loss happened over time. My disease is progressive. It deteriorates slowly. And so every single year, or even halfway through a year, an accommodation that had been made to assist me with my vision may no longer work. And so it made it really, really tricky. We were constantly having to refigure out what's a new system to allow this student to learn. And so those were some of the accommodations. And I was always like the back corner of the class. And it was really tough to make friends because, you know, you're already different, right? Kids are already noticing I'm different because I have this big desk with this special woman that sits beside me. I always had females. Obviously, there are male vision itinerants and male EAs. I always had a woman. You know, I have this like special woman. At one of my schools, they thought she was my mom. And I was like, no, I'm not coming to school with my mom every day in grade 6, you know? So it was really tough to make friends because all day, every day, I'm in the back corner of the classroom with this extra large desk and this extra woman sitting next to me, this extra adult who's assisting me to learn. So I'm not really participating with the rest of the class. I do want to insert a quick clip here. I will say like the one positive thing of having vision itinerants and EAs was the bond that I formed with these women in my life. I definitely had to like mature and grow up and learn to speak to adults as a young child because I was every day speaking to far more adults than I was to children, but it allowed me to build really strong bonds and relationships with these women in my life. So just a little shout out to some of my EAs and my vision itinerants. We've got Rachel Stinson, Michelle Vasu, Miss Messina, Miss Gonzola, Miss Downey, Marilyn Turner. These were all like incredible women in my life that I definitely had amazing bonds with. So shout out to any of you if you're watching. And the worst would be things like when they would have like, and I know a lot of other students struggle with this too, especially students with dyslexia or other forms of reading learning disabilities, speech impediments. I know this affects many more students than just blind students, but it certainly affected me, which is when they'd have like each student go around and read a paragraph or read a sentence. Oh my God, that was always the worst. Or I often had teachers do things like say, okay, in silence, everybody look around and make eye contact with somebody that's your partner on the project. Well, guess what? I was never able to do that. So I'd be the one like left behind. So it was really hard socially because you're just so different, right? Everything is showing these little 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. This girl's different. She's weird. Don't hang out with her. She's not like you. It made me very clearly more vulnerable. And so that's where it was very difficult socially. I was bullied my whole way through school. Grade 1 to grade 12, I experienced bullying, and I've talked a bit about that on my channel before and shared some of those experiences, but I don't really want to focus on that today. I really do want to focus on like the actual core education side of it and how things worked. So I also would always have my own laptop, or not laptop, sorry. I did eventually get a laptop for school, but at first, until grade 7, I had just a desktop, which would have different programs. So at certain times I used Zoom Text, at certain times I used JAWS. Now I'm a voiceover user. So these are different forms of assistive technology. When I could see more, it was Zoom text, and then as I lost my vision, it briefly became JAWS before voiceover became available. I would use things like CCTVs, which is another form of a more heavy-duty magnifier that would also be set up in the back of the classroom. At every school, I also had a private room, and so for me, I would go there during tests, and I would be able to write my test separately there, so that one, I could have my extra time, but also because I was doing things in Braille or with a voice, and so, you know, it was loud and distracting for other students. So oftentimes I did have to get segregated from students, which again just makes you look like the different kid. I would also go there to learn Braille. I would always go to my private room to learn Braille. It's where all my Braille books were stored, because say one math textbook, like one grade 11 math textbook, it's like that thick, that would translate to like some years 120 Braille volumes that were that thick. It's a very thick, cumbersome language. I made this video about Braille 101 if you want to check it out. But yeah, it was very tough. So in Canada, you have to learn French as your second language credit in order to graduate. But I was exempt from French. So during French class, when all the other students were learning French, that's when I would be taken to my private office and I would learn Braille. And that counted as my second language credit. Yeah, so it was really like every year just constantly figuring out what accommodations need to be made now as my vision and my learning was changing. I was exempt from learning cursive because it was too curly. My eyes couldn't keep up and couldn't decode it, especially because my eyes shake when I would read. My eyes are jumping all over the page. And so I would kind of have to like put my finger on a line and follow my finger in order to read. And prior to fully switching over to technology, the font that I was reading was size 48 bold. Yes. By grade 5, I was reading size 48 bold. And so you can imagine how much you're taking in when it's that large. You're really taking in letter by letter. When you're having to go slow to make sure your eyes aren't shaking and you're keeping up with what you're reading, it's very difficult. To be honest, like I can't stress how difficult school was. And it's tough because I don't mean to say this to like toot my own horn, but I am intelligent. You know, I got 80s and 90s pretty much all the way through school. But it was so damn hard to get that. And it was like and my brother got like 90s his whole way through, but he got them, you know, yes, he put in effort, but like not nearly what I had to put in. And I knew like I would be able to grasp this and do this and complete this so much easier and so much faster if I could just see, but I couldn't. And the moment that I was able to learn by physically doing things, I would just get it so much quicker, so much easier. And it's just incredibly frustrating. Something like math, I could only exclusively do through Nemeth, which is Braille math. It was too difficult to do it on the computer. So math, I did the whole way in school through Braille. And then most other classes I did through my laptop. But yeah, it was very difficult. If you can imagine, say something like grade 11 or grade 12 English class at the university level, you know, the highest level of learning, which was the stream that I was in, when you have to write an essay on Shakespeare, if you can imagine learning Shakespeare simply through listening and not being able to see the English, right? Because it's a very old English is not the way we speak or write today. So learning it through not being able to see the words written down was very difficult. And when you're reading just through audio, it's very easy for your brain to wander, to get distracted, and then all of a sudden you're 3 pages further along and you've missed what's happening and you have to go back and try to. And when you're gearing up to, you know, when you're reading A Midsummer Night's Dream and you're gearing up to write an essay about that, try to put yourself in the position, you know, as a sighted reader, you're earmarking, you're taking notes as you go, you're folding down the corners of pages to make sure you can come back and reference that. You're able to quickly pick up the book and flick through to find what you're looking for. They're refining it more and more, but at that time, you certainly couldn't do that. And so I literally would just have to like try to remember or look up like Cliff Notes or things online to help. It was truly painful because I was dealing with such severe bullying, and then I was dealing with trying to learn in a way that was so not accommodating to how I learned. And the schools tried everything they could to accommodate, but that's just not how the school systems are structured, you know? So it was very difficult. For the parent of a disabled child who's going through the traditional education system, until your child can advocate for themselves, you're gonna need to really fight. You know, you're gonna need to really fight to get them their education, because unfortunately there's so many incredibly intelligent students with disabilities who aren't able to reach their full potential simply because of the way our system is structured for education. Classes are full, you know? Some classes have like 28, 32 students and one teacher, and at times multiple of those students have physical and learning disabilities. So it can be very difficult to accommodate all of that. And I recognize the strain that teachers are under. So as a parent, you really do need to fight for your child and fight to get the right team around them, which is, you know, luckily what my parents did. And that is part of why I left school and changed schools so much was because of bullying. But another large part of it was simply to find a school or a school board that could meet my needs, that could accommodate, that did have the budget for what I needed in order to learn. And it was very challenging. And for students who do identify as having some form of a disability, if you're struggling, you're not alone, but you will get through it. You know, it's hard, it's a fight, but you will get through it. It does end, you know, and that goes for anybody who's struggling in school. Whether you're just struggling to learn, whether you're struggling with bullies and friendships, it does end. I can't believe I graduated in 2012. It's been so long, but yet it's flown by. Because now I get to structure my own life and define my own life and accommodate my own needs and advocate for myself. And I get to play to my strengths and not be forced to face my weaknesses every single day, which is a really nice feeling. I think another method that myself and my family use throughout my life and continue to use is the idea that you do get more bees with honey than vinegar. I think it's flies, but I say bees because, you know, bees. But you do. So trying to be empathetic and understanding while also really strongly advocating for what you do need. Nobody's gonna know what you or your child needs until you step up and tell them and put your foot down and make sure it happens. So that's all I can think to talk about in this video. I hope it was interesting or helpful. If you do want to know more about my experience, or there's anything in this that I touched on but didn't delve into and you'd like to know more, please do let me know. I'm happy to do follow-up videos, more about all the different technologies and things we tried. Yeah, just let me know. And in the meantime, if you want more Molly, you can click up here and check out this video, or up here for this one. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give this a thumbs up if you feel like you learned something new, and I'll see you next time. Bye.